This is AI Inside, episode 55, recorded Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. Move fast, break things on rocket fuel. This episode of AI Inside is made possible by our wonderful patrons at patreon.com/AI Inside Show. If you like what you hear, head on over and support us directly, and thank you for making independent podcasting possible. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of AI Inside the Show, where we take a look at the technology that is interlaced with, that's a throwback term, with artificial intelligence in all directions. Joining me, Jason Howell, is Jeff Jarvis. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey there, boss.
Yeah.
I've got bad FOMO. I wish we were doing this from Paris if we got invited to the AI summit. But no.
Not this time.
Right.
Next year, maybe so. I don't know. Like, they show the room where everybody was in. It seems kind of like a small event.
I think this was
big, but it's small. You know.
Yeah, it was small, high level. I went to a thing called EG8 some years ago, which was all internet and Sarkozy. And it was huge in the Tuileries in a big tent. It was quite the thing. I think this is a more elite, small group.
Yeah.
And I'm not in it.
Definitely has the elite factor going for it. We're definitely going to talk all about that here coming up. But before we jump in, want to thank folks for your support on Patreon. We really appreciate those of you who are joining us. You know, we're kind of increasing the number of patrons, and it really helps the health of the show. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show is how you can join the Patreon, like Cyprian Nicolescu. I hope I got that right, Cyprian. But anyways, it's a pleasure having you on board. Thank you for being with us. Actually, you've been on board for a while now. We got more shout outs to throw around, including a new executive producer that we'll announce at the end of the show. You can do this, patreon.com/AI Inside Show, and become a part of the community there. And, you know, of course, just go to AIinside.show, which is just the page for the show. It has all the information that you need. You don't need to support us on Patreon in order to get the show, obviously. But we appreciate if you do that. So I think that's about it. Why don't we dive right in? And, you know, you mentioned at the top the 2-day AI Action Summit. Action Summit. That kind of sounds like it's going to be a really exciting movie. Yeah, totally. 60 countries signing the final statement at the end of the 2-day event.
Jason, was that all the countries who were there?
No, it definitely was not.
No, it wasn't.
A couple of countries that did not sign the statement. And by the way, this is a statement that pledges inclusiveness, openness, safety, and the ethical development of AI.
None of which should be hard to agree to, you'd think.
I wouldn't
it's rather
think
anodyne.
So, but
gee, which were the jerky countries who didn't sign it, Jason?
You'd never guess. The United States and the UK did not sign the agreement. And
the US these days, I could predict. The UK, I don't understand why they didn't. I don't really get that.
Well,
it was just this French thing.
It had something to do with or at least the reasons that they mentioned has to do with restrictive language, and I don't know, how you parse that out. What would it have said differently that would have had them agree to it? I don't know. It kind of seems like from the U.S. perspective, anyways, what's in vogue in the current administration seems to be anything that's kind of like a team, a team player type thing. We're not interested because we're doing what's right for us, and so we aren't going to sign. That's my interpretation. I don't know what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. What's interesting about this summit, I didn't follow the summit in detail because I wasn't invited. But what I read about it in the coverage, I saw one summary because there were two prior summits. The last one, I think the last one was in England. And it was all doomer, safety, time. And from what I understand, this one was much more optimistic. And France is not known for its technological optimism, so that's a good thing. And was, I think, far more constructive. And trying to say, what do we have here? What do we need to do? What do we need to pay attention to? This is the right way to approach it. So I think it sounds like it was all in all, a fairly good meeting, and just a positive way to say this is here. Whether
it's not.
I don't want to
anywhere.
say lump it, but it's not going anywhere, right? And so how do we work smartly with it? And I think that's the right attitude.
Well, and you mentioned optimistic, and I think there's optimism in the world of AI, which this conference or this summit certainly had. But then there's kind of like the next step of optimism, which is we can do no wrong. Translated, U.S. President J.D. Vance really urged the EU to prioritize growth over safety. So there's like optimism, there's like healthy optimism, which is like, it would be cool to kind of, work with this and it's not going anywhere. So why don't we embrace it? And then there is, and I think the extension of that is remove all regulations, let it be what it's going to be, let it run wild, because that's how optimistic we are about this technology. And I think that's where, like JD Vance came from. He said, quote, "We believe the excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off, and we'll make every effort to encourage pro-growth AI policies." So really going kind of like, I guess away from the regulatory kind of perspective that the previous administration was certainly cautioning towards.
Yeah, and I think Eric Schmidt also spoke to them, and I think I'm trying to call that up right now. I was glad to hear that he said that we have to focus on open source, and that the real lesson of DeepSeek is that you need development in a lot of quarters at the same time, and the way to do that is open source. And Europe had been talking, the EU had been talking about trying to forbid it. I think that's long gone, but. I also believe, we've talked on the show many times, that open source is the way to go here. And I think that that voice was heard loud and clear in Paris.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was talking about building AI adhering to the EU's strengths. The EU is going to invest 200 billion euros in artificial intelligence to catch up, and could be interpreted as a way to catch up to the progress that's being made in the U.S., made in China. Talking DeepSeek, as you just mentioned, and you put in the article from Kevin Roos from the New York Times, where he summarized in his mind 5 big takeaways from the AI summit, and one of his takeaways was that Europe seems to be having regulation regrets, and that's kind of what you were saying as far as France was concerned.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Europe in general, and Germany in particular, and France as well, have prided themselves on being the leaders in regulation. The world needs somebody to think about what could go wrong in a sensible way and deal with that. That's fine. But that doesn't get them very far when it comes to investment and development. And so, I think that they're trying to say, we'll invest.
Yeah. It seems... What came to mind for me around this, and there was some discussion in the Discord, which if you are a patron, you get access to a pretty fun Discord. We're talking a lot more about AI in that Discord. And something that kind of occurred to me through like so many different things happening in AI and technology in general is that this idea of we've got to have safety at the forefront, ethical considerations, all of these things. It almost feels like very suddenly they've fallen out of fashion. And I don't know, like fashion feels like the right word for me when it comes to big tech. They're really making changes that very suddenly to say those old efforts, that's no longer in vogue. Now it's, it's removing the regulatory hurdles. It's removing, the language that might protect this person or that person or whatever. And let's just go for it and see what happens. And that seems
it's move fast and break things is back.
Yeah, right. It's back. Yes.
But the tools to break things with are more powerful than they used to be.
Yes, that is so true. It's different than it was. A few other highlights before we move on. Smaller countries now feeling like they too can be a part of the AI game thanks to DeepSeek as one example.
And open source from
open source, yes.
Meta and Mistral.
That's right. And then policymakers being fed the idea that AGI is imminent And I think it was Altman that was assuring Trump that in his mind, AGI was something like this is applying pressure on the administration to take AI serious, is the fact that in your term, AGI is going to happen, President Trump. And
we may not get to Mars, but you'll get AGI.
Right. You'll get AGI. And what does that mean? And you want to be with history here, right? So let's work together. Yeah. So anyways. So that is the AI Action Summit in Paris. And then I'd say another, kind of one of the big headline moments in AI this week has been, once again, the Elon Musk, Sam Altman drama, chapter 20. I don't know. At this point, I lost count.
The never-ending soap opera.
The never-ending story. That's right. That Elon Musk's ex-AI company, along with a bunch of investment funds, submitted, and I don't know if they actually submitted at this point, because OpenAI's director, Larry Summers, said he hasn't received a formal bid yet, but an unsolicited bid to merge OpenAI's nonprofit assets with XAI to the tune of $97.6 billion. Really easy to look at this immediately. Like the vibes I got immediately were, I remember when Elon Musk did something similar to this, went on Twitter and said, well, I'll just buy Twitter. And that became,
for by the way, about half the price of all of OpenAI.
Yeah, right. Right. Big time difference.
Which is worth more, really?
Oh, I mean, Altman even punctuated this, right? His response to Elon Musk's tweet was, no, thank you, but we will buy Twitter for $9.74 billion if you want. Which is, a lot less, let's say, 10% the total of what Musk had said about OpenAI.
So I take pride that this is a little my I told you so here, that I've been saying for ages that ever since Altman said that he wanted to go for profit, that and even before that, as Microsoft was readjusting its relationship with OpenAI, I've said that this cap table is going to be a bear to set. That this is about who owns what piece of OpenAI as a for-profit company, who owns what assets. This is all extremely complicated. It reopens every negotiation the company has ever been in with every investor, including and especially Microsoft. And so what Musk did, by all accounts, is really just he trolled. Yeah, he threw a grenade.
He threw a grenade in the room.
And said, I'm going to overvalue this stuff so that it messes you up in trying to negotiate what gets left in the for-profit and the not-for-profit. And all of that has to be approved by the state of California. I think it's California. Maybe it's Delaware, but it has to be approved by regulators. And so they will listen to valuations that have been set in the marketplace. So, but I think the immediate assumption is Musk is not buying OpenAI. But let's not make the mistake we made with Twitter. Like, he's not really going to buy Twitter.
Exactly. Sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy to a certain degree. And if that was compelled to happen, if, let's say they submitted a formal offer, the OpenAI board has to consider it, right? The fiduciary responsibility and all that. And if it was decided like, okay, well then it really is kind of to a certain degree anyways. I realize it's not the same entirely, but it feels very similar to kind of the Twitter thing and how that went down. I was like, that wouldn't happen. Would that happen?
And then he got, stuck. Well,
Right.
At the time we said he got stuck with it. He didn't want it. And I think that was probably true at the time, though now, of course, he's worth many multiples more than the amount he spent. And he's standing in the White House with his kid on his shoulder, picking his nose, talking to the president and running through every possible department of government because he had this. So, I eat crow about the wisdom of buying Twitter. Oh, yeah, it turned out to be very wise for what he wanted to do. And he had more money. However, he's not paying attention to Tesla. Tesla sales are down 60% in Germany. Stock is going down in Tesla. That has an impact on him, and we'll see where that goes. Musk is unpredictable. We know that. He could go farther. He could end up with OpenAI. I saw somewhere, I can't find it right now, I think it was the Wall Street Journal asking, well, who's better to run OpenAI, Musk or Altman? But I think this was a game. I think this time it's a game.
Seems like it. It's a game that if it were to become reality, I don't think Musk would have a problem with it. Even if it was a trollish game, he'd be very happy with the outcome. Which I guess is to say he had very little to lose to throw this grenade into the room.
You said, and I missed this part, Jason, but you said it earlier. So he's bidding for what part of OpenAI?
To merge OpenAI's nonprofit assets. Yes.
Okay. But I don't think that's even set as to what is going to be for-profit asset and what is going to be not-for-profit asset. Yeah.
Right. No, that's
part of the negotiation.
It's totally. It's part of the negotiation, and there's still so much uncertainty around how that transition's even going to work out. This just complicates it even further.
Which is what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
He is the great complicator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So it'll be fun to watch. I don't think it means much more than that, but it's the never-ending soap opera there. And I don't know if I put this in the rundown. Did I put this in? Just for mention. So already, the New York Times says there's a play called Doomers, which is about the peril and promise of AI. It is based on the 2023 ouster of Altman from OpenAI. So someone has already turned this into entertainment, right? So it's off Broadway. I don't know what it really is. It's a review in the Times. I have no idea if it's any good or not. I don't know if it's even worth going to see. But it's amusing that this is seen already as a soap opera and being turned into one. So
what
we thought
a nerdy now soap opera that a year and a few months later, we've got a play of some sort that's in the New York Times about it. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. I just picked up one paragraph from this. I'm sorry, but I got to say. But the characters erupt in flagrantly unlikely monologues, as when Alina, the company's scrupulous chief safety officer, tells her colleagues about disturbing, recurring dreams, one of them vividly sexual.
Oh.
This is not the nerd world I knew.
That wasn't in the original story.
No.
It's an interpretation, maybe.
There are mentions throughout of Elon, no last name given, but there doesn't need to be. No. Seth, annoyed with Alina, snipes, "You should have just had Elon's baby when he wanted to."
Oh, my goodness. Sounds like such a soap opera.
How can people hold out their heads in any pride in this? I mean, anyway, it's all a carnival. It's all amusement, and it's huge money are involved. And geez.
And
So I can't wait for the sequel, which is about Elon's purchase of OpenAI.
It'll get roped in there. It'll be an ongoing saga. I mean, I remember the time when movies and plays and stuff like this, like you kind of had to wait like a decade and a half. You had to get some distance from it, 10, 15 years before anyone was like, okay, we'll approach that. And now it's like, oh, it happened a year ago. We'll go ahead and write a play about it. Okay. Entertainment.
Yep.
People pay for it, apparently. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I'd say I'm super curious to hear what you have to say about the Thomson Reuters copyright lawsuit that's happening right now. That's a really big deal as well. That's coming up in a second. All right, we're starting to get some rulings on some of the earlier copyright lawsuits related to AI, and this lawsuit in particular was first filed in 2020, so quite a ways down the line. Thomson Reuters just won, I think I'm saying this right, just won its lawsuit against AI startup Ross Intelligence, which is a legal research, or was, sorry, they're no longer around, but was a legal research company. The ruling says the startup was not permitted to copy the editorial content of Thomson Reuters to build its AI-based legal platform. It did not constitute fair use in this case. Like I said, Ross Intelligence is not around anymore. They actually shut down back in December 2020. So
because of the suit, because of the expense
of the suit. Mm-hmm. But here we are 5 years later, finally kind of getting the judgment there. The judge had initially concluded differently and I think my understanding of this is a little fuzzy. He had concluded sometime last year and ultimately denied the motion for summary judgment, but then reconsidered the judgment opinion, which is what led to this week's announcement. So I'm not sure exactly where along that time frame the judge decided to reconsider it or why, what the detail is there, but nonetheless, here we are.
Yeah, and this is a complicated. All cases are complicated. It's all cases are unique, but this one, I don't know what the precedent value is of this. I'm concerned about the
curious.
rejection of fair use, because I have been arguing that training models on fair use is fair use and transformative. However, in this Ross case, there's a couple of factors. One is that Ross used it to build its own new product that did depend heavily on what came from Westlaw, which is a Thomson Reuters product. A. B, this whole area of law and copyright is very complex, because laws are ours, right? It's our government and our structure, and those belong to us. There are cases going way back into the mid 1800s. I've just wrote about one of these cases in the book I'm writing right now, where a stenographer used the transcripts of courts to create a new product. It was very similar. And in this case, the stenographer won. It was taken as fair use at the time. And the belief was you really couldn't copyright the law. But that's changed a lot. And what happens is that you can, in the sense that Westlaw has its classification, interpretation, organization, taxonomy, whatever, on top of the law, and that's what they own, and that Ross benefited from that versus the law. So it's a little bit different from I think saying, well, we read open web pages and used that to train. They did more than train. They created a product based on it. It benefited from Westlaw's value added. And so the judge was very direct and said, none of Ross's possible defenses hold water. I reject them all.
Wow.
So
that's quite a turnaround from last year concluding very differently. So that's interesting to me.
So I haven't read anybody yet about what the implications of this are for the many, many other cases that are out there now.
Right.
But
38, at least 38 AI-related copyright cases making their way through the courts right now.
I'm amused every time now. Of course, I read the New York Times, and they mention OpenAI. They have to say that the New York Times is suing OpenAI in every damned case, and OpenAI is in the news constantly, and it amuses me.
Yeah. So in this case, so then is it a matter of taking that information and regurgitating that information as if it was theirs, and that would be the difference, versus training on a data set that contains that information, but the AI or the LLM or whatever you're using is interpreting that to mean things that it devises? You know what I mean? Like in this case, was it truly like we use that data set and we kind of regurgitated it, and that's the problem?
Yeah, I think so. And do not. Yeah. I'm no lawyer, and I don't know. I don't know Jack, but I think that's my guesswork here is that if you're using text, broadly speaking, to train a model, and you're literally training it to speak. You're training it to know this word goes after that word, no matter what the context is. In some cases, it's more context specific because certain words like litigation only occur generally in certain contexts.
Yeah.
But all in all, you're teaching it to talk and listen. That, I think at a high level, still strikes me as fair use. In this case, it was a very specific application where this was something you could come in and use this instead of Westlaw. That's the other issue with fair use. If it has to be transformative, and it cannot replace. If it's a one-for-one replacement, that's obviously an issue.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, notable for the fact that it's kind of one of the earlier copyright cases related to artificial intelligence. Notable for the fact that if that being the case, it is an example of fair use not working. But it sounds like to me, from what you're saying and from what I've read through here and everything, that it's probably not necessarily a bellwether for some of the future cases that we've talked about a lot on this show that have to do a little bit more with using the information to train on the back end and making that transformative. This seems like it's a little bit different, but still notable.
Yeah, and a lot of this is about the head notes and key number system in Westlaw. That's quite specific to this case.
Oh, very, yeah.
And so I'll put something in the rundown you can add into our own show notes from a law firm that's writing about this. I just found. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Excellent. Yeah, you can just go ahead and drop that in
there it is.
Under there, and I will definitely include that in our show notes, which you can find at aiinside.show. Often just attached to the podcast if you download it or watch it on YouTube. We put them everywhere. We throw them all over the place. Let's see here. Okay, if you thought DeepSeek was shifting the kind of approach of big spenders and big tech on artificial intelligence and kind of driving the cost down, as we've been talking about, and people have been surmising that, DeepSeek proves you don't need to spend a lot of money. How is that going to directly impact these big tech companies that are throwing massive amounts of weight and money behind their, the training of their models and their domination in this race that is very much on? Well, Microsoft, Google, Meta, all projected to increase their spending on AI by 45% from last year. It's a $215 billion combined total, at least, according to the Wall Street Journal article that I have right here that I can show. Amazon also expected to increase their spend, largely due to AI. Andy Jassy, who is Amazon's CEO, said in an earnings call last Thursday, quote, "We think virtually every application that we know of today is going to be reinvented with AI inside of it." There it was. There's the title of the podcast.
Hey.
AI inside. I didn't even mean for that to be.
Let's sue him for trademark violation.
Yeah. You're going down, Amazon. We're going to make at least $10 from you. And Sundar Pichai, Google's CEO, said AI is, quote, "as big as it comes." And that's why you're seeing us invest to meet that moment. I mean, all these big companies just realizing, the war is on. They all do not want to be left behind. They all want to be at the head of the pack. And if DeepSeek was was thought to possibly apply pressure on them to not feel like they need to spend a lot of money, think again, it doesn't seem like that's the case. But they probably planned all of this well before the DeepSeek thing happened.
And we're not sure how cheap DeepSeek really was. We've talked about that on the show.
Well, that's true. There's doubts about that now, right?
Exactly. And so when I worked at Time Inc. and I started the magazine Entertainment Weekly, I prided myself on starting it very penuriously. I had less of a staff. Believe it or not, this is going to get relevant in a second. Just give me a second. I had a smaller staff for a weekly magazine than any magazine in the company for a monthly magazine. I saved $3 million a year on technology because we were the first one to use Macintoshes to produce everything with my wife who set that all up. I prided myself on saving all kinds of money. And then some wise old sage said, "Jarvis, nobody ever got fired here for spending too much money." And I think that's the attitude in Silicon Valley, is they don't want to look back. And some analysts saying, well, if they hadn't pulled back, if only spent more, if they'd only invested more, if they only had the guts, if they only had the courage, they'd be better off right now. They don't want that in this gonad war where we are right now. And it's not just these companies. It's also Macron in France saying we're going to spend $100 billion, whatever the number was. And that goes as well, that everybody's trying to spend money now on this to prove that they can be the best and the biggest. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And then... that's so funny. Like, no one ever lost a job by spending more money. That's so true. Yeah. That's so interesting. Seems like perfect with where they're at right now. But I also came across another article, Wall Street Journal article, that was kind of pointing out that the investment that we're seeing is kind of counterpointed with the fact that IT unemployment is rising. Meta let go of 4,000 people. That was a bit of news that was rumored to happen at the beginning of this week. Over the weekend, it was like Meta's going to lay off, and sure enough, they laid off, I think, 4,000 people, 5% of the workforce there.
And I think that's more telling than a projection of spending, because you can always cut back on the spending. You can always choose not to sign something. It's just something you're telling the market to get the market prepared for the cost. But when you lay off 4,000 people from one area and shift those resources to another area, that's a more telling story, I think, about where the strategy is. And so Meta is trying to clear desks for AI people. And I think that says that's where their priority is.
Right. Yeah, it really seems that way. Google, of course, we've talked about offering buyouts for its employees to prioritize AI. Salesforce, we hadn't talked about, reportedly laying off 1,000 people and making way once again, for hiring salespeople for its AI products.
And evidently, I saw some story that Benioff has said that every sales call has to include AI agents now. And it was only a year and a half ago I heard a Salesforce executive in San Francisco say, we're being cautious about agents because we're not sure we trust them yet. But that sure changed overnight.
Apparently we trust them a lot now.
Everywhere.
They need to be everywhere. And then I mentioned the Wall Street Journal article, and then I didn't really talk about it much. But IT unemployment is rising. 5.7%, they say, actually rose from 3.9% in December to 5.7% in January, passing the overall unemployment rate in the process, and largely because AI is impacting the labor market in IT as well. So
it's going to tackle that area. It's the first on the mountain for the avalanche.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Not that it's surprising that AI would have those impacts, but I guess the question that I have out of something like that, especially when you're talking about people who are technologically minded, like IT workers, is does that ultimately long term put them out of a job, change careers, or does that or is that kind of a nudge for them to transform their job and their skill set to work with AI, to be skilled in that regard so that they can continue doing what they were doing, but now through the new kind of lens of what that means?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Jason, because I think even there, to think that, well, I've got to remake myself now into AI land, may be a bit of a mistake. So I had a wonderful conversation last Friday with Mike and Marcy McHugh, the founders of Flipboard.
Okay.
And they have created Surf, which this is not directly an AI topic, but I'll get there in a second. I keep on doing that show. Well, I may seem irrelevant, but I'm going to try to find relevance.
No.
So Surf is a really great combination of the open protocols and social. So from the one place, it's in private beta now, but one place I can interact with people on Blue Sky and on Mastodon, and I can read ghost newsletters, and I can watch videos, and I can do all these things from that one place because these are open protocols. And my point, finally, is that I think because of the fall of Twitter and I believe Facebook and Instagram, we see a lot of action in social. And I even think I was talking to an executive at Mastodon also last week, and I said that part of Mastodon's appeal might be that, unlike Reddit, Eugene can't just sell everything on Mastodon to OpenAI.
Sure.
Because it's federated and he doesn't control it. And that's the advantage. Yep. And it's kind of your space that's free from AI. Now, anybody can scrape it, but nobody's going to make money on your stuff. My point is that social still lives. Social used to be the whole web not long ago. Before that, search was the whole web. But we still have search and we still have social. And these things are additive. And so I think that people who've lost their jobs because they're not AI, it may be very smart to go and learn more about AI. It may be smarter to see what's affected by it or what's being neglected these days. And I don't know if I were advising a former student on such a thing. I'm not sure what I would think.
Yeah.
You know,
Could go either way.
and what does it mean to learn AI now? When at one point, at one level, it's very high level math in making the foundation models, but otherwise, it's anybody's a programmer now. Anybody can do it now. So I'm not sure where this really goes.
Yeah, that's a really good question. What does it actually mean to learn AI?
But let me ask you this, Jason. If you're knowing what this is doing to computer programming, I don't know what your daughter's interests in life are, but if one of them were going to college, and asked you, not that at that age they ever ask us parents,
right.
If they asked you whether they should major in computer science, what would you say?
Oh, that's such a good question, Jeff. I mean, I don't necessarily operate from the assumption that computer science is some bad thing to put your time into. I think that there's plenty of distance to be gone with computer science, and I just think what the target or what the focus of that education could be is different now than it was even 5 years ago. As long as you're moving with the general kind of wave of everything, I don't see a problem with it. And also just like at my core, I'm just kind of the kind of person to be like, well, if you're passionate about that, then you need to follow it. So that's But is that a wise decision? Is it wise for them to study it? I think it still is. I don't see why not.
I think you're generally right. But when we had our preparatory shows, we talked to an executive who said, well, no, it was not. It was Jensen Huang who said that universities should stop training computer scientists. Mm-hmm. I think everybody would say that's going too far. But how many jobs are there going to be? It was not long ago. If you got a law degree, you were safe. If you got an MBA, you were safe. That's not the case anymore. If you have a CS degree, your employment is not necessarily insured anymore. Let's just say that. No.
But Chris, who's watching the live stream, says computer science has AI courses.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The AI tracks. Kevin Koppler, thank you everybody for so many sudden comments. I'm focusing on AI data center infrastructure. Seems to be
that's going to grow. You bet, Kevin.
Yeah, and and I think that kind of gets to my thought about that, which is as a blanket recommendation, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying don't do that.
No,
because I think there's a way to find it. There's a way to find a connection that actually still continues to be relevant.
The other thing that Chris says that's right is that it's about theory and math, and I think that's a really important structure. My son, who was a developer at a young age, he sold an application to Facebook when he was 14. And everybody thought he was going to do that. He's not doing that now, but he's helping kids now. But when he started in computer science in college, he was kind of disappointed because it was so much math, and what he wanted to do was build things.
Yes,
and many CS programs are not building things; they're about the math. Now, the math is always going to be useful, I think.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Your son sold. At what age he sold an application?
At 14, there was when for a while Facebook thought it was going to be a platform, and they opened up for applications, and they even killed some of their applications so that you could do it. I forget what it was exactly. It was a way to I think share your classes.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and he replaced it and did it, and it didn't get sold to Facebook. I'm sorry, it got sold to a company.
That's pretty
cool.
awesome.
It was.
Wow, what an achievement for a 14-year-old.
Oh yeah,
that's amazing. That is super cool. Cool, excellent discussion there. A bit of a Google roundup I thought I'd throw in real quick. First of all, this is only slightly and quickly AI related, but Google I/O announced it's happening May 20th through 21st. 4 key areas: artificial intelligence, Android, search, Chrome. And, there's hints on the site, the I/O 2025 site, that there's going to be, stuff focusing on Gemma, the Gemma open model, Google AI Studio, NotebookLM, that sort of stuff. Also, this is interesting. It happens during the same week as Microsoft Build, where Microsoft's going to be talking about its own AI efforts. So that's going to be a big news week. There's going to be a lot to discuss.
Are you planning to go to one of them?
I am absolutely going to Google I/O. I already got my invite. I already accepted.
Oh.
And so I will be there.
That's good.
For sure. Wouldn't miss it when they give me the invite. I'm an immediate yes. So
Yeah, used to be we got nice goodies like a phone, but that doesn't happen in recent years.
you never know. You
never know. The hope's always there, hey, Jason.
Now, I did mention NotebookLM, and speaking of, there's some real quick news there. NotebookLM Plus now available with Google One AI Premium for $20 a month. So the NotebookLM product that's free that everybody can use, that doesn't change at all. Google's really focused on just adding more capabilities into the Plus, so the baseline will stay free according to Google.
Like you could make like unlimited podcasts and stuff.
Yeah, right. Like, if you're Plus, then you get 5 times as many audio overviews, 20 per day versus 3. Do you really need more than 20 audio overviews per day?
Right.
Up to 500 notebooks versus 100. You can add 300 sources to a notebook versus 50. I mean, but the baseline that they give you for free is pretty solid.
It's pretty
I have
great.
To say.
It's pretty great. Yeah. The main thing that I find is when I got into the original, I think I was in beta. I could only add like 2 documents, and that was very limiting. To be able to have 300 documents in for researchers, to be able to then go and query all of that, and which one said this, who disagreed with that, that's valuable. That's very valuable.
It's a part-time job collecting 300 sources.
Well, so
let alone understanding it all.
Let's see here. This pile of paper is for 2 paragraphs.
Oh my goodness. That's wow. I would not have guessed that. I've always had such respect for people who can get their thoughts together and organized for
this is for the previous section of about 10 paragraphs. So I'm now writing about the linotype. That's my next book. And I'm in the chapter about its impact on labor. And it can pile up real fast. Because I go down another rabbit hole and I find, you find a citation. This is how real academics do it. I'm not a real academic. But, there's a citation I got to follow. There's another one I got to follow. There's another one I got to follow. And then because I want to mark them up, I print out like crazy. I'm surrounded by these papers and other documents. So if I had started this, if NotebookLM were there when I started this book.
Yeah. Well,
I might have done it very differently.
Well, and I mean, it does exist now. So maybe you get on the other side of this book, and whatever your next book is, whenever that may be.
That's what I'm thinking.
That'll be an interesting.
Because I have a next one in mind, and there'll be a lot of papers and theory and things that I'm going to want to put in there to try to get some sense of. And so, I probably will do a lot more making sure I have PDFs of them, and rather than printing them out, maybe marking them up on the screen and making sure they're all in NotebookLM, and I organize them that way. Mainly, not because I want it to write anything, but I want to be able to query it.
You want to be able to,
Who said this? Who disagrees with that?
Right. No, that stuff is really good.
I remember this quote. Where the hell was it? That's a simple search, but it's easier. Who argues this point? Right. That'll be possible there. So but it means that I've got to use my my beloved scanner. So certain books I will end up scanning in just so I can get them in NotebookLM.
So any of the time that you save in one aspect is removed on the other side because you've got to plug the analog hole, I guess.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I'll be curious to hear. I'm sure you'll talk about it, but I'll be curious to hear kind of how that goes. If you find at the end of the day that it was useful, or if it was just kind of shifting your work from one part to another. That's been my experience with AI. Is it makes certain things really helpful, but it doesn't necessarily save me a ton of time because I spend it in other ways.
Yep.
That's related. Yeah. And then finally, a new AI mode potentially coming to search. Thought this was interesting because we've already got, like we were just talking about, NotebookLM, which is really great for research. We've got all of these tools that are starting to kind of, make themselves known. We've got deep research. I've talked about Perplexity in the past. All these, research oriented AI tools are, certainly a thing right now. And so you would think, or I would think, that NotebookLM is kind of what Google's effort would be around that. But apparently that's different. This AI mode coming to search potentially, it's being dog fooded at Google right now. And it quote, search intelligently researching for you. So organizing information into easy to digest breakdowns with links to explore content across the web. It's kind of like a Google search research tool. So you might be able to ask, and this is a query, that Google gave as an example, how many boxes of spaghetti should I buy to feed 6 adults and 10 children and have enough for seconds? Or, compare wool, down, and synthetic jackets in terms of insulation, water resistance, and durability. And I'm sure you could ask it to put it into a table or something like that. We're just seeing more and more of this stuff. And this seems to be a version potentially integrated into Google, or I don't know if it's a certain mode that you snap into that's separate from search or whatever it is. But yeah.
But the interesting thing here, a fewfold. One, so the what am I trying to say? Taxonomy? No, the history, I think, of media is, the way I put it is, we spent a century in destination mode, come to us to buy our publication. Then we had search, and that generated SEO. Then we had social, and that generated audience development. Now we have queries, generative, and that's GEO, generative engine optimization, and then agents, we think. And so there's a few things. One is, how do media properties? I just had a meeting with a big media company last week where there's, how do we deal with this? And I said, your issue is discoverability. How do you know that this machine is going to call upon your material? How do you make it so they can call upon it? And how do you get branded for it? What benefit do you get out of that? That's big questions, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also true, and we talked to Shipstead in our second show, they were doing that exact same thing on top of their content. And so you can query, that was just a test, but you could query all of Shipstead's product reviews and get into a conversation with it. So I think we're going to find that you're going to see a micro and a macro version of these searches. That within a brand, that's a new way to get to information rather than just reading stories. And then the macro version is across many brands, Google, you replicate that. So where this comes out in the end, I have no idea.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing is for sure, and Pichai hinted at this, I think earlier this week, said 2025 is, quote, one of the biggest years for search innovation yet. Dun, dun, dun. Is he talking about something like this? I mean, the search product, as we've known it from Google, is changing. And there's no doubt about that. Whether it's changing for the better or for the worse, that's the...
Well, and the question we always ask is hallucination, so-called, and randomness. Will you get the same answer twice in a row? No, you won't. Does that affect the credibility of the search? We'll see.
Right. Yeah, we absolutely will. All right, quick break. And then when we come back, we've got a few stories to round things out, including an article in the MIT Technology Review that is talking all about AI crawlers and what it does to the web. That's coming up here in a second. All right. I thought this article was interesting. You put this in here, so thank you for doing that. And I think we talked a little bit about these topics in the past, but MIT Technology Review has an article analyzing the conflict brewing between websites and AI companies, specifically as it relates to AI crawlers and kind of the... I don't know, kind of like the arms race or the war that is the back and forth and what that does to potentially deteriorate how the web operates over time.
The issue is, as I understand it, back in the early days of search and search engine optimization, your aim was to be crawled. You would do anything to have Google crawl you, right? Because that was the only way you were discovered, the only way you could be found. You wanted crawling desperately. Now, because of AI, crawlers have cooties. And so if you start cutting off the crawler just for AI, but then you start to say crawlers are bad, then you're not only hurting your own discoverability on the web, you're also hurting search results and thus the primary entry into the web.
Right.
And this was something where I had an event, as you know, about more than a year ago with the Common Crawl Foundation, which has an open source crawl of the web, cited in more than 10,000 publications. It was our first show. We had on the head of Common Crawl, I think.
That was our premiere show, episode 1.
Yep. And so you can go back and watch that if you'd like. And so crawling was a good thing. It was the way we found things on the internet. And if crawlers have cooties and people start cutting them off wholesale, then that affects all of us. And we lose the open ethos of the web, and that worries me greatly. So we'll see where this goes. I say at the end of every story, I say, we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But I think it was a very good catch on MIT Technology Review to look at that higher level question about what's happening with how the web now operates.
Yeah, right. Can the open web survive? Who controls the information is another thing that they point out, kind of the concentration of control over the information of the biggies in the room versus the small players, small content creators, hiding their content behind logins or taking it completely offline because they're concerned about what happens to it. And that's an interesting thing to consider. And then, always also coming back to another topic that we talk about frequently, which is the quality. Like, we do want quality artificial intelligence systems that we can use. I mean, if you're using them, they have so much potential, but if they're not being fed high quality information, then they lose a lot of that potential. And that's not what we want either. So I don't know what the right answer is there. And then speaking of agents that crawl around the internet, Jeffrey Fowler from the Washington Post, who I've always really liked his writing and kind of his approach on things. He played around with ChatGPT's operator in his article. He asked it to do a few things. This operator is ChatGPT's agent, essentially browser agent. He asked it to find cheap eggs nearby, and the agent went out, it researched, and then used his credit card to buy a dozen eggs for $31.43 and have them delivered to his house. And
I think he overpaid by about $1 these days.
Yeah, I mean, eggs are expensive. I don't know if a dozen eggs are $31.
No.
Almost $32 at this point. On the flip side, Jeffrey also asked operator to find him a less expensive Comcast plan, which it did identify, and it also read through the fine print to note that, eventually on this date, the price would go up, and that enabled Jeffrey to decide whether that was actually a good deal. And I think he ultimately passed on it anyways. But I think what really kind of jumped out to me here is kind of the idea that it's agents do things for us. In a perfect world, an AI agent acts on our behalf in the ways that we would want it to. So it doesn't, do things that we wouldn't want for it to do on our behalf, right? But in order to do that, it really needs to know so much about you. And that's one aspect, not just behavior, not just preferences, which are all really useful and beneficial for an agent to truly operate in your on your behalf, but also things like authentication and passwords. And so truly everything. And
you have to trust it.
You have to trust it with all that information. You have to trust that information is only for this agent and doesn't go back to the mothership or whatever. And, whether the architecture is even set up to do that to begin with or not, that's going to be a real big hurdle for a lot of people, is just because they won't understand why that is or is not the case. And it really kind of speaks to this idea that seems to be a recurring theme with technology that I've noticed, which is that we say we want all these things. And then when it comes down to it, we realize that in order to have all these things, we have to give up those things. And we say we don't want to give up those things. And so I don't know where it leads.
We'll see, as I like to say today. I think so. And clearly with agents, you're going to have to check its moves as it goes. Yeah. And so there's this whole notion of whether or not we're actually seeing reasoning from these models. Certainly with agents, you're going to see steps. And just to take, to get the hens off the hook here for his eggs, operator found a dozen large white eggs, not even organic, for $13.19. Now, they're as high as $7 in some places now, but that's almost double. So that's bad, right? But then it purchased those, adding a $3 tip, a $3 priority fee on top of that, on top of the $7.99 delivery fee on Instacart.
Oh, jeez.
And a $4 services fee, I'm not sure what that is, and a 25-cent bag fee.
Oh, my
So
God.
at some point in that process, it could have come to you and said, Jeff, you sure? Or if it were really smart, we'd go and say, I'm finding the average price of eggs now is this. Do you need them that badly?
I'm finding that the average eggs price is this. I've noticed in your calendar that you have 20 minutes open and your nearest grocery store has them in store for $5. Why don't you, in that 20-minute time, drive down there and pick up the eggs?
Right.
Great. Thank you, agent. You just saved me $30 or whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, it's fun. I'm glad he's playing with it and see where this goes. And so that's fun.
A lot of the articles that Jeffrey writes tend to be a little kind of on the playful side of this sort of stuff.
That's a good way to put it.
I always appreciate that. So
a good day, good rundown. Lots of stuff.
Good times, yes. And thank you, Jeff, for being here and for talking about all this fun stuff with me each and every week. And we talked about your authoring of a book that has not been written yet or is in progress, but we have a couple that are already written. The Web We Weave, Gutenberg Parenthesis, magazine, all at jeffjarvis.com. People should definitely go there and check it out. And I'm super curious to hear how your process goes as you're
thanks.
As you're integrating. Yes, super interested. I had mentioned not too long ago that we have a new YouTube channel for AI Inside podcast, and we do AI Inside Show. So if you go to YouTube, you can see it's a channel dedicated just to this show. So that's pretty awesome. We've got it all set up. Oh, I love how, because we're live, it's got a nice red
isn't that nice?
Live thing around. I had never noticed that before. So it looks really nice. Go there, subscribe. We're kind of building up the subscriber base for the YouTube channel. That's important for what we're doing. So thank you for that. You'll get notified when we go live like we did today, very last minute. I forgot to create the event in advance. Also, AIinside.show is the webpage that collects everything that we do. It's got links to all the things. It's got, it does have the audio podcast, but it also has, an embedded video player for the video version. So if you really just need one place to go to find everything that we're doing, you can go there. And then finally, patreon.com/AIinsideshow. If you want to support us on a deeper level, you can certainly do that. And we have some amazing people supporting us on that level. Dr. Do, Jeffrey Maricini, WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina, Dante St. James, and our newest executive producer, Bono DeRick. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bono. Good to have you all on board. Y'all are going to get if you haven't already, get a t-shirt and the access to the Discord and ad-free shows and all the things that we do. And also the pride knowing that you're helping us.
And our gratitude. Thank you.
And our deep, deep gratitude. So thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. We love doing the show, and we will see you next time on another episode of AI Inside. Bye, everybody.